All right, so let's get started. This webinar is called Strategies to Become a Better Angler, kind of a broad subject. But we're going to talk about a lot of different things, some concepts, and I really want, this is a webinar that I really want people to be involved with. So if you do have a question that's kind of related to what we're talking about at the moment, please chime in, ask me a question with the Q&A, and I will try to answer it. And I'm the host, Miles Burghoff, aka Sonar. Just a little bit about myself. I am a tournament bass angler. I fish the Bassmaster Opens, along with a lot of regionalized trails. I also host a fishing show called Sweetwater, or co-host rather, with my buddy Joey, and that's on NBC Sports, Sportsman Channel, and on Sun Sports, which is a Fox channel. And yeah, and I love doing these webinars. I think they're a lot of fun. So this webinar and all the other ones I've done this season are presented by Navionics. Big shout out to Navionics. Thank you guys so much for doing these. You guys can watch all these different webinars that all the pro staff of Navionics does on their website or on their YouTube page, and it's a lot of fun. So let's see what we got. We got some, from time to time, I'm going to be checking the chat and checking the Q&A just to make sure. Okay, we're looking good there. Okay, looking good. Let's go back. I'm going to have to not do that. Okay, so strategies to become a better angler. Okay, there's going to be some things. These are going to be pretty broad subjects, and so I've got some bullet points for each of these subjects. But I would also like some input from you guys and some questions, kind of getting the snowball going, and building upon those concepts I've already written down. So we're going to be talking about discovering what type of angler you are. That is so essential in fishing, I believe, and becoming a better angler. Prioritizing instinct over knowledge. I think that's a really important part. Of course, all these are important, so I'm not going to say that every time. Using memory to your advantage, keeping it simple, test when it's at its best, quote unquote, pay attention to little details and obvious patterns, and the right kind of confidence. So the first concept I want to talk about is discovering what type of angler you are. I've realized over the last few years that I can't do everything as well as some people can. Okay, I can't go out there and deep crank ledges as good as Kevin Van Dam or Mark Rose. You know, there's certain things that I'm not very good at, but there's certain things that I'm really, really super good at. And I tend to, when I start focusing on those things, I start to have the most success, both in tournaments or just fun fishing. And so acknowledging what you do best and enjoy most, and that, I think that's one of the key points here, is if you enjoy it, you're going to do much better. And those things are essential to realizing your potential, whether you're a tournament angler or you're not. You're just going out there for fun. Embrace your current strengths and discover new strengths and throw the rest away. And what I mean by that is kind of what I just touched up on. If you are a shallow water power fisherman, why shy away from that? Why focus yourself out deep when you're going out there and maybe you've got a guide trip, or maybe you've got a tournament coming up? If it's crunch time, if it's business time and you need to get out there and do your best, you need to focus on the things that you do best. And so if you're a shallow water power fisherman, don't shy away from that. But as fishermen, we always want to grow. As competitors or just fun fishermen, we always want to do better. We always want to figure out new techniques. So discover new strengths. Okay, build off of what you've already discovered as a strength. For instance, I don't fish offshore all the time, but when I do, one of my strengths from the very beginning was a Carolina rig. The Carolina rig is great for just dragging and covering water and finding key pieces of structure. But I knew that I needed to find something different that could catch me bigger fish in situations where they weren't going to hit a Carolina rig. So I learned how to use a football jig. Okay, so that is something that it's kind of on the same plane, but I'm discovering a new strength. And I've realized, and I've realized that it's important to throw away the things that you don't like and you're not good at, and you just don't have a good feel for them. There's no shame in saying, "Hey, listen, I suck at a drop shot, so I'm not going to do it," because not everybody's going to be good at a drop shot, and you don't need to. You know, and I'm just using that as an example. There's techniques out there that you might never ever pick up, and that doesn't make you a lesser angler. That just means that you know what your strengths are, and that helps you build confidence, because you're confident when you're fishing your strengths. And so it's important to focus in on those key core strengths that you have. So that's kind of a point that I like to make for everybody. I think that is so important. If you look at the really, truly great fishermen, usually they're tournament fishermen, but they're good at certain things. Some are more versatile than others, but you very seldom see them do some techniques. For instance, you know, Denny Brower is a legend. He's somebody that I've been looking up to for years. And he is a shallow water guy. He's a pitching and flipping fiend. And so he focuses on his strengths. He knows what his strengths are, and he beats a lot of people, or at least he used to. He still does in some of the semi-pro events. But he beats a lot of people because he focuses on those strengths. So anyways, don't want to get too carried away with that, but I do think that's important. Don't try to be decent at everything. Try to be great at a few things. I think that that's so key. And we're out there to have fun. And it's not that much fun going out there and doing something that you're getting frustrated with and not being very successful with. Okay. So if you're feeling that, maybe you need to go back to your core strengths and do that. And then learn something new when things are kind of at their best. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. One thing that I do recommend, even though I'm a big proponent of fishing your strengths and knowing exactly what you like to do. I'm a flipper, pitcher, shallow power fisherman. Those are the things that I really like to do. But there's also some things that I realize that sometimes I'm going to have to fish a little bit deeper, fish more structure oriented instead of shallow cover. And so I need to diversify a little bit, but I want to diversify to techniques that are not too far away from my shallow water techniques. You know, maybe they're a little bit more power fishing-esque out deep, you know, throwing a swim bait or a heavy Carolina rig or a heavy jig or something like that. Something I still feel comfortable with, but is something that can work in a different depth zone and in different conditions. And another thing that is really important, especially if you are a tournament angler, is building upon winning strengths. Now, I've talked about this before in some of my other webinars. It is so key to build upon winning strengths and not just some techniques that you know, maybe you can catch a lot of fish, but not a lot of big ones. For instance, you know, wacky rig's great, but you don't want that to be your primary strength, because there's a lot of deep, places that we go to, a lot of places that have dirty water, and a wacky rig it can be a very specific type of technique. You can catch a lot of fish in it, and I do mention wacky rig because we talked about it earlier. But you want to have strengths that traditionally, if you're reading the reports from some of these tournaments, that you see them quite often, like flipping, pitching, cranking, swim baits, jigs in general. Those type of techniques that tend to win tournaments and be very consistent in the top 10, those are the type of techniques that you want to focus on trying to learn and to gain those strengths. So does anybody have a question about that page right there? I'm going to wait a second. And one thing that I want to mention is I've got 3 $50 Fitzgerald rods gift cards, Fitzgerald cash, that I'm going to be giving away for this thing, and those are to be used for any of the Fitzgerald rods in the line. And so I'll be at the end of this whole deal, I'm going to be doing a little giveaway. Still got to figure out how I'm going to do it. Maybe just have somebody guess a number after I write it down or something. But we're going to do that. So we don't have any questions, so we're going to move on. So prioritizing instinct over knowledge. All right. This goes against what everybody really talks about in bass fishing. I mean, as fishermen, we get really intense with our product or our knowledge absorption. You know, we got Bassmaster magazine, FLW magazine, Fish and Game, whatever. We've got everything, every medium. There's just a huge amount of information on bass fishing, and we're absorbing everything. I'm the same way. I used to read every single book. I've read it all. I mean, even the new magazines, you know, I can't help but flipping through them. But it's really important to me. I've realized that instinct over knowledge is key. And I'm going to pause real quick because I got a question. Oh, I don't have a question, but yeah, random giveaways are pretty awesome. So hopefully some people get those and enjoy Fitzgerald rods. They're pretty awesome. Fish don't read the same textbook. I know that's kind of you know, it may be cliche, but honestly, it's true. I mean, they obviously don't read textbooks. Fish are instinctual creatures. They go out there and they just do their thing. They're motivated by certain things, spawning, feeding, and just surviving. And so as fishermen, you know, as much as we want to know exactly what's going on in their heads, we can't. But what we can do is we can try to lower ourselves to an instinctual level and go after those fish. I know this is a really deep concept, and I hope I don't sound too much like a hippie on this, but it's something that's really important. Fishing isn't rock science, people. So I want that to be something that you guys kind of take away from this, is that a lot of the time when I'm fishing tournaments, the worst tournaments I've had, including the one at Chickamauga a couple weeks ago, worst tournament I've had in almost 8 years. But I think that the reason for that complete failure as far as standings goes is because I overthought things completely. Okay, it was very simple. They were up spawning shallow. There was a lot of big ones there, and I could have caught them that way, but I didn't. I overthought it. So it's so important to foster strong instincts. So strong instincts simplify things, which knowledge makes things more complicated. Okay, so the more things that you learn and that you take in, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but you've got to be able to sift through that stuff to kind of get to the real goods, the stuff that really is going to matter in a certain situation. So that's what you need to kind of pan for, so to speak. And instincts come with experience. There's no doubt about it. They don't come right away. Okay, it takes a long time for you to gain experience and to build those instincts. And to me, instincts are something that you know, little by little you're going to get over the years. But I want you to pay attention to instincts versus knowledge when you're out on the water. Knowledge is great for when you're off the water and you're kind of brainstorming to yourself like, oh, I could use that next time that I go out, or wow, that's the reason why those fish weren't up spawning at that time. You know, knowledge can be good, but what you'll find once you get on the water, it becomes frustrating because it's like these fish should be doing something else, but they're based on what I read, but they're not. So so you'll find that quite often. You'll realize that your gut instinct, your gut feelings, and the decisions that you make from that are going to be way more successful than something you read in a book. Just saying. Not saying, you know, don't read books, obviously, or magazines, or watch Sweetwater. Just saying that put a little bit more investment into your own instincts and experience. Building instincts through memory. Instincts are letting go of reason and embracing a sixth sense. Okay, it's just essentially, you know, going out there and kind of winging it and going by feeling your gut instincts. and they tend to come from your own memories. I don't think that there's any fisherman out there that is born with all the instincts they need to go catch fish. I think that it's something that they experience through time. You're born with some instincts, but over time you're going to learn more and more from your own experiences, your failures and successes. Okay. And one of the key things that I think that you guys should take away from this, and that you guys should try, is we tend to, as fishermen, we tend to use the buddy system. We go out there and we go fishing with friends or family, and we tend to learn from them and how they fish. And you know, I didn't grow up being a co-angler. You know, I fished a few tournaments fishing as a co-angler, but primarily I fished by myself. When I moved from California to Florida, I went there not knowing anybody at all, and just fished by myself. I literally fished for 3 years by myself, didn't have a single person in my boat. Sounds pretty lonely, but it actually was extremely beneficial because I learned techniques by myself that, you know, if somebody else had taught me, I wouldn't have had the same instincts. I wouldn't have that same instinct memory that they do because they learned it themselves. So everything that I did, from flipping, pitching, punching, spinner baits, chatterbaits, whatever it was, I learned by myself. And so I gained those instincts. I built those myself. And that's something that you can't be taught from somebody else. So I highly recommend that you, a good majority of the time, you go out and fish by yourself. Try to figure it out yourself, and it's really going to pay big dividends later on down the line. I don't see any questions right now, so I'm either captivating everybody or putting them to sleep. So if you have anything to say, any questions or anything, go ahead and use the Q&A. I do have a Q&A question. Okay, cool. Joe says, in regards to instinct, when you come upon an area that has all the looks of a prime spot with a great weed lines and great cover, and the time of the year dictates using a specific style that has been working, how do you keep trying with no success? Is it try and move on, or do you stick with it for a while? So that's a good question. To simplify things, I believe what you're asking is when you get into an area that just looks so good, and you get there and it's like, oh man, they should be on. Everything that I read in that magazine or in that book says that they should be here. You know, that's but they're not. You're not getting bit using a certain technique. This is a really good question because it's something that has really made me a good Florida fisherman, because Florida is a very instinctual state. The fishing down there is just go fishing and go, you know, figure it out day by day. That's how it is. And so in regards to this, the scenario that I'd think of is, okay, so I go into an area on Lake Okeechobee. The fish should be there. I'm looking at it, and everything looks good. Like, just theoretically, it just like everything's there. There's bait fish around, but I kind of have this like feeling that I've got this feeling. I don't know if it's bad or if it's good. I just am kind of neutral on that area. If I'm going and I fish for you know, say 15 minutes, which I think is a suitable amount of time to find the fish, and I'm not getting bit, there's nothing going on, then I'm probably going to pack up and leave, because I had that little inkling. You know, all the knowledge that I have is telling me that they should be here, but that little inkling, so it's just like that instinct is popping in and just being like, there's something about it I don't really like. However, if I go into an area and everything looks good, theoretically everything is like perfect and ready to go catch a bunch of fish, but and my gut is telling me absolutely, you know, my knowledge and my instincts are combining to have this like feeling of you know, assuredness, then I'm going to spend a lot of time there. Okay, I'm going to start with one technique. I'm going to go fast through an area, fishing the faster moving techniques, and then I'm going to be like, you know what, this deserves a little bit more time because I have that good feeling about it, and that's the key word, is feeling. And then I'm going to slow down a little bit. And so it really depends on the type of area and the type of lake, how long I'll spend there. But I'll spend an extra 20, 30 minutes in an area if I have that gut feeling that things are going to be good. But generally, if you have a gut feeling, and you have a lot of experience, you should get bit pretty quick. And if you don't, sometimes I just forget about that area and move on, because your job isn't to catch the hardest catching fish in the lake. It's to catch as many good sized active fish that you can possibly catch. So what about Eddie asked, what about when memory keeps you in a spot for too long because you're there, you've caught them there in the past? That's a really good question. That's why as a I tend to try not to get stuck with any local knowledge. I'm not really a fisherman that knows one lake extremely well all the time throughout a year. I tend to have a lot of different lakes that I go visit. And so every single time, even if I come back to say Okeechobee, which I consider my home lake, everything's different. So I don't tend to fish the same places all the time. But I wouldn't, if you were there in the past in a spot and it produced so well, if you are struggling there when you come back at a different time period, I would just totally write it off and move on to the next spot until you find that you cannot catch them anywhere else, and then maybe spend more time at that spot. But overall, my goal is to go catch fish quickly. And if you are struggling to go catch fish on a spot that should be good, then maybe there's something that has pulled them away from that area. Maybe they've received too much pressure, and maybe it's time to move on. So I would make that move fairly quickly if I'm in a tournament situation or a guide situation. But if I was fun fishing, maybe I'd go experiment a little bit. Maybe I'd just fish, just see if maybe it's an angle issue where I have to cast from a different angle or a presentation difference. But if money's on the line, I'm practicing for a tournament, or I'm practicing for a guide client, or my guide clients are in the boat, I'm not going to waste my time on an area, even if I've had great success there in the past. There's something wrong with that area for the fish not to be there, and I want to either move on to the next spot and see if it's a timing deal, come back later, or just move on. That's my perspective on that. So don't have any more questions on that. Oh, shoot. So one of the things that I do to build my instinct is to make a mental note of how I feel about an area, and the feelings of accomplishment when I start catching fish and I put that puzzle together, and when I discover something new. I try to remember exactly what I was feeling, where I was the sun beating down on me? Was it raining? So on and so forth. Remember those situations, because a good memory, you'll hear it from like Kevin Van Dam or any of those good pros. They have exceptional memories. Okay. And I'm not talking about just overall data. It's just, I think that they remember feelings and just the overall general feelings of that particular situation where they're doing well or not doing well. So let's see if we got another question. Looking good. So I've kind of touched up on keeping it simple. Fishing is not rocket science. Once again, it is fishing. These fish are just, all they're doing is living for certain goals. They are driven by certain goals in their life, whether it's feeding, spawning, or surviving. Those are the things that they're concerned with. So it's not rocket science. We're not trying to go to the moon or anything. So simplify your fishing arsenal to include only gear that you know and trust under an entire variety of circumstances. Okay, so as fishermen, we are also some major hoarders. I mean, we have a lot of stuff. I was just looking through my gear because, like, I'm moving, from California to Tennessee, and I tell you what, I've got a lot of stuff, and I threw a lot of gear away this year in an effort to try to simplify things, because the last thing you need is, when you're trying to make a split-second decision, especially during a tournament or even tournament practice, the last thing you need is to question it. Not only question what type of technique you need to be throwing, but out of the 100 different types of jerk baits, what jerkbait I need to be throwing. So it is my belief that through years of trial and error, you should have the ability to decide between 2 or 3 different types of jerkbaits, okay, in certain colors, to cover all the situations that you'd throw a jerkbait. Same thing with worms or any type of soft plastics. You know, for flipping and pitching, I generally have a beaver style bait, like a palmetto bugs from Z-Man, or a flap and crawl style bait, or I have like a tube. Those are the 3 baits that I'm going to be throwing on the soft plastic side, and then I throw a jig in there. That is, so as far as flipping and pitching, it's those 3 things. And so I keep it very simple in that regard, and I think that that's a very important part of keeping your overall fishing process simple. So select a few things that are really good. Focus on those, the baits that you have the most confidence in, the colors you have the most confidence in that can cover all these different situations, and I think that's going to do you best. So we got some more questions. So Scott asked, how many colors of each bait, the type of bait do I keep? So that's a really good question. On a regular basis, there's very few colors that I keep. Okay, so let's start with the 2 different categories. There is baits that you fish throughout the water column that are traditionally made to imitate shad or some type of pelagic bait fish. You know, blueback herring, whatever it is. So those are the baits like crankbaits, spinner baits, chatter baits, you know, swim jigs. Those baits I like to have either something that's just shad colored. I'll have the 3 colors that I'd carry is a very realistic shad color, maybe has a translucent skirt if you're talking about a spinner bait or a swim jig or a chatter bait. It's made for clearer water. You can see through it. It's got a little bit of glitter, but it's generally kind of that white silvery color. Okay, something around that kind of hue. And then I'll go over to white, which is a little bit dirtier water situation, a little bit more stained, but still trying to imitate shad. And then I'll go to like a citrus shad, something chartreuse, maybe a blueback, maybe a blackback, something like that for the dirtiest waters, and especially during the summer, something that those fish are going to really react to. So so I keep it simple with like crankbaits and those types of baits in that realm. But then when it comes to soft plastics, traditionally I'm fishing those on the bottom. Really, I just need 3 colors for pretty much all situations, and that's green pumpkin, watermelon, probably watermelon red, and then black and blue. Those 3 colors can catch fish anywhere in the country. Green pumpkin's the greatest all-around color out there. You can fish it in slightly stained water, clear water, and in a lot of different situations. It imitates a lot of different bait fish. Watermelon red is excellent in clear water, fishing around vegetation. And then black and blue is the best dark water bait, muddy, you know, low light conditions, something where you want a bigger profile, easier to see. And so those are the 3 colors that I'll use for that. Now, when I go to a particular body of water, like for instance, the Chickamauga tournament, I had a really good bite during practice throwing a methylate worm, just a regular old floating worm, real bright. If you don't know what a methylate color is, it's like pink and orange mixed together in this neon bright color, and it's crazy looking. But under certain circumstances around the spawn, fish go crazy for it in that region. So that's a situation when I go to a certain region, maybe I'll buy some of those specialty colors to try to get some extra bites. But I may not carry them all over the place, with me all around the country. So keep those key little colors, and then once you get to a specific area, maybe buy a couple of specialty colors. So that's my thought on that. All right. And again, you can keep on asking questions. So as fishermen, we always want to continue building. You know, you never want to get complacent or comfortable with just one or two techniques. Okay, it's good to have strengths, obviously, as we've talked about. But when you do want to learn something new, it is important to learn when those techniques are working best. So for instance, the floating worm I just talked about, it's not something you want to throw in the dead of winter, I don't think. I'm sure that maybe you can catch a few fish on it. And it's not something that I throw in the dead of summer. It's generally something when the fish are up shallow in the spawning period of time where they're really aggressive and they're really territorial. That's when that bait tends to work. So I'm not going to test it out in the summer, and I'm not going to test it out in the winter, because I know that those aren't the optimum times to catch fish on a floating worm, especially in methylate. But I'm going to wait for the spring to be able to test that out. So be sure to only test baits when they're supposed to be at their best. The conditions, you know, if it's bright, sunny, calm conditions, you don't want to go out there and try to learn how to fish a jerk bait. Maybe it's best if it's a little bit windy, you got a little bit of clouds, and it's during that early spring, late winter time period. So it's important to learn techniques when they're at their best. Got another question. All right, Joe, I am a kayak angler for the Hobie fishing team, and I'm so happy to hear this philosophy. Yeah, I'm glad that you're stoked on it, man. So yeah, that was just a comment. Really appreciate that comment, Joe, because it's simplicity, especially in a kayak situation. You know, I'm sponsored by Old Town. I fish out of the Predator series. Even though, you know, all these new fishing kayaks got a lot of room in them, you still want to simplify your gear and your tackle. And I've got a bag that's like this big. It's got everything that I need for pretty much anywhere I go with my kayak. So good point. Thank you. All right, so little details and obvious patterns. So you want to pay attention to both the little details and the big picture stuff, the stuff that's obvious, okay? Little details, you know, they may include shad flicking on the surface, water temperature change going into a pocket, you know, a slight lure color difference or retrieve variation, those sort of things. Those are the sort of things when you're on the water, you need to pay attention to those little tiny details and try to make them work to your advantage, okay? So those little details are going to help you discover some type of pattern that's going on that you may have not realized before. But on the flip side, you always want to pay attention and always want to start at the obvious patterns. So when you go to a body of water, or you know, you haven't been to a lake that you usually fish for a long period of time, you want to pay attention to those obvious patterns before you go out there and start trying to kind of get your brain turning on what the fish might be doing. You know, for instance, spawning. If the fish are it's, you know, the water temperature, or maybe you know, it's been sunny for a couple weeks, they should be on the beds. That's an obvious pattern that you should pay attention to. So it's something that you need to pay attention to going into, or be thinking about it going into a day on the lake. One thing that I've learned about obvious patterns is sometimes they are very susceptible to fishing pressure, but there's certain places in certain situations that people tend to overlook these obvious patterns. And I was one of them at Chickamauga. At the Chickamauga Open, I totally ignored the shallow sight fishing deal, because I was just like, oh, everybody's going to be sight fishing, and I'm not going to be able to get on any fish. So wrong. I was so wrong in that thought process. I should have been spending the last 2 days of practice just looking for them on beds. And you know, so it was something that those fish were used to on that body of water. You know, they were very skittish, and not a lot of people were catching them. Could catch some of the fish on the beds, but if you hit them at the right time, you could have caught them. And that was pretty much the one way that I could have caught a big bag to recoup. So It's really important to pay attention to the obvious patterns too. Don't shy away from them, because there's going to be plenty of guys that are just like, oh, everybody's fishing offshore, I guess I shouldn't even bother fishing offshore. Not necessarily true. If it's something that you feel comfortable with and you're really good at, don't shy away from it. Go after it big time. All right. All right. I like this. There's only 2 key points on here, but I think that this is something like, I think this is one of the key points of this whole presentation when I was thinking about things to talk about today. Finding the right kind of confidence. Okay. You've heard it. It's a cliche. People talk about confidence all the time. Confidence is key. Fishing is a mental game. All sports are mental games. And you know, when it comes to confidence, I think that you have to have the right type of confidence. And the right type of confidence is confidence in your abilities. Okay. It's not confidence in a particular bait. It's not confidence in a particular color. It's in your confidence to be able to make a decision on what type of bait that you need to throw, what type of color you need to throw. So you need to change your mindset from saying, oh man, I'm really a green pumpkin goby guy. Like I can catch them all around the country, catching them on green pumpkin goby. That's probably true, but you should be more confident, not in that particular color, but you should be more confident in your ability to be like, the water's a little bit too dark here. Maybe I need to switch over to a black and blue. And you have complete confidence in that choice. That is the right type of confidence in my mind, is not in some inanimate object, okay, a bait or a color, but in your actual decision-making skills. Okay, so that's something I think that all anglers should adopt, and they should all focus on their own ability, their own selection abilities and decision-making abilities over other things. So those were the key points that I wanted to talk about today. It was a very short PowerPoint, but I made it short because I wanted to talk to everybody individually. If anybody has any questions, I want to answer every single question you guys have. If you guys have anything that I talked about that you want to ask, or if you have anything that is off the subject that you want to ask, I want to hear it right here. But before we get going, before anybody leaves, we've got 3 Fitzgerald rods gift cards to give away, $50 a piece. I'm going to write down a number, a bunch of numbers here, and then I think the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to ask some people to send or to guess the number. So while you guys are thinking of some questions, I'm going to go ahead and write this down. All right, we're getting some questions. All right, so before we get to some of the questions, we're gonna do this giveaway. All right, so for everybody out there, this is gonna be on chat. All right, so this is going to be on the chat. The first person to guess the number is going to be the person that wins the first one, and then we're going to do 2 others too. So between 1 and 20, ask or go for the number. We're going to do this in order. Ooh, golly! So the first one. Scott, Jeremy, you got it with 18. All right, so good job. I need you to email me at sonar@sonarfishing.com to get your gift card, and give me your address and I can get that to you. All right, so now the slate is well, let me do a whole nother number chain. 4, 5, 6. All right, so between 21 and 40 is the second one. Oh, man, we got some fast typers. All right, the first one is with 27. That's Daniel Carney. Again, send me an email at sonarfishing.com. All right, Daniel Carney, congratulations. And finally, let's write down another one. All right, between 41 and 60, go. Still haven't got it yet. $42, Mario. All right, it was 42. Mario gets it. All right. I really need to organize this better next time. All right, Mario, again, sonar@sonarfishing.com. Send me an email. I really appreciate it. All right, so let's get into the questions. Congratulations, guys. So those gift cards, or Fitzgerald Cash, as they call it, those are to go towards any rods that you want. Highly recommend the Versa series. If you are a kayak angler, if any of those that won that, or you're a kayak angler and you're looking for a rod, the Versa is really good, really durable rod. I love it for kayak fishing because I don't break them very often. Haven't broke one yet, rather. All right, so let's go to Q&A. We got some questions here. For those of you that need to go, I really appreciate your time. Do me a favor, you guys, and if you like this, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter. My Facebook handle is Miles (Sonar Burghoff). Instagram, it's Sonar Fishing. Twitter, you can find me real easy, and then I'm Sonar Fishing on YouTube. Check me out there, sonarfishing.com. Thank you guys that are leaving right now for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed it. So let me go to these questions real quick. So first question I have, still have people sending me numbers. I'm sorry, it's done. How has side imaging changed my approach to fishing? Side imaging hasn't changed. It's obviously changed the game for everybody, because new technology is always going to evolve how people fish. But the one thing that side imaging has done for me is it has made it a whole lot easier for me to focus on shallow fishing opportunities, because a lot of people are finding themselves out deeper. And though I love structure scan, I'm a Lowrance guy. I use structure scan, and you know, the side scan is great. What I do like to use it for is I like to use it for finding different types of bottom hardnesses and grass. Okay, and so in that respect, it has changed my fishing. But I do tend to use my 2D sonar quite a bit still too. I feel like that is still a very viable technology. and I use it quite a bit. So it definitely is helpful for finding certain things, and you can actually find fish pretty easily with it when you find a school that you normally wouldn't find with your just traditional cone-shaped transducer signal. Yeah, it just depends on how you like to fish. If you're an offshore guy, then it's going to change your life completely. If you're a shallow water guy, it may not change it as much. So it's definitely a technology you want to have, but for most fishing situations, it might not be a complete game changer for me. What baits do I suggest for post spawn? So post spawn, what type of it depends on what type of place that you're fishing. Let me do a couple scenarios. So post spawn, what's happening during that period of time is obviously it's after the spawn. Those fish are either recouping, they are guarding fry, or they are already all the way at the main lake and they're focusing on their summer patterns. So generally during the post spawn, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be trying to intercept fish outside of the spawning areas. And if they're on structure, I love Carolina rig, I love a football jig, and a lot of guys do really well with a crankbait. Okay, fishing structure that's outside of those spawning areas towards the main lake. If you're on a lake like Okeechobee or a grass lake, I love punching, going, or not just punching, but flipping. Flipping's a great technique. So that's a really broad question to answer specifically without knowing the exact conditions. But keep in mind, it's not about the baits, it's about what those fish are doing and where they are. So whatever technique you need to use to target fish that are on a long sloping point outside of a spawning area, which could be a Carolina rig, could be a shaky head, could be a jig, do that. If they are out on the main river channel, they're schooled up and they're eating, baits, bait fish, around current oriented places, maybe a crankbait or a big flutter spoon or something of that sort. Or maybe you don't even like using any of that stuff. Go try to find those fish that are more solitary, that kind of live in certain areas all year round, fish up shallow. That was kind of a broad answer. All right, so we've got Ben. My wife's home. Hi, sweetie. Any pointer, or no, we've got Ben. As for a tournament co-angler, any special advice you can give to improve fishing at the back of the boat? I'm not a co-angler most of the time, so I'm not the best guy to answer that. But I'll tell you what, one bait that I would highly suggest for you fishing from the back of the boat would be the Ned rig. The Ned rig is like pretty darn amazing, and it catches a lot of fish. And a lot of times when it comes to fishing as a co-angler, it's all about catching your limit and having a shot at one or two big fish. From the front of the boat, it's about 5 quality fish in most situations. But as a co-angler, you want to go out there and try to catch your limit, and the Ned rig is really good. I would focus on, number one, your strengths, okay, like we talked about before, but also focus on those baits that catch a lot of fish. They may not be big fish. They may struggle to make the minimum size on the board, but they catch a lot of fish, and that's the Ned rig, a wacky rig, a shaky head, those sort of things. And so that's what I would suggest personally. Any pointers on working the Ned rig? Well, Mario, I've used the Ned rig quite a bit, and I just read the Bassmaster magazine article in it with the actual Ned himself. And he fishes it a certain way where he actually swims it back to the boat real slow, kind of does this kind of S-shaped shake at the almost near the water with his rod tip. I don't tend to do that. I like to use it as a spot casting bait. Okay, so it's just this tiny little presentation, and I like to cast it at little isolated pieces of cover to try to get a fish that's that may be a little bit more weary of a bait to eat that bait. So for instance, on Lake Oroville in California here, I fish a tournament out here, and traditionally it's a spotted bass lake, but if you catch one largemouth a day, that's pretty good. I caught like 2 limits worth of largemouth fish in the Ned rig, just casting it around little laydowns and stuff. And I just make these short little tiny hops. I have a real dainty spinning rod. It's 6 foot 8, I believe, Versa Series medium light action rod, or medium action rod, spinning rod, and I'm just making short little hops. I let it fall to the bottom. It has this perfect little glide, and then I just hop it just a few times and bring it back to the boat. So that's my general technique, but there's a lot of ways to fish it. So Wally asks, how much do you use electronics in my fishing? All the time. I feel naked without my electronics. But like I talked about before, the structure scan, the side imaging, those are very helpful tools. They're something that I don't think that I'd want to fish not have on my boat, but most of the time I'm using my 2D sonar for while I'm running, just seeing the different structures down there and the depth. And then knowing what the water temperature is really key for a shallow water fisherman like me. And also my maps are really key. Obviously my Navionics maps are really important. And so those are the things that I use the most, is probably my 2D sonar and my maps, to be honest with you. So, because as a shallow water guy, I need to know how shallow it is or how deep it is, what the water temperature is. And I also want to know what the structure looks like, and Navionics maps do the trick on that. So Eddie asks, how many confidence rigs do you keep on the deck, or do you recommend? That really depends on the type of body of water that you're in. At Chickamauga, by the end of each day, I was putting away 25 rods from on top of my boat. I had used every single one of those confidence rigs throughout the day. So it really depends. You know, if I'm down on Okeechobee, I'll have 3. Okay, I'll have a grass kickers or like skinny dipper style bait. I'll have a something like a punching rig, and then I'll have like a light flipping rig. Okay, so those are the 3 things that I'll have on the boat deck at all times. And I'll have a bunch of other stuff in the rod locker, but those are the only things that I need on that particular body of water. So it just depends on, if you're familiar with the lake, you can cut it down a lot more. If you're not familiar, you start with some confidence baits, but then, you know, have a bunch of others that you're somewhat confident and familiar with in the boat. Ben, what should Ben, could you ask your question again? I can't understand that one. I'm going to go down to Diego. Is there any particular time of the day that you think is best for catching, say, bass or pike or walleye? Well, I am not a walleye professional or a pike professional, but I would say that it really depends, especially walleye. I don't have a lot of experience with walleye, but I will say during for bass, we'll use bass because that's what I'm most familiar with. Yes, but it also depends on the type of time of the year, the season. So during the springtime, people kind of get it backwards sometimes. During the winter and the spring, fish like the warmth. Okay, they're cold and they want to get warmed up. So most people think early morning, late afternoon, those are going to be the key times. But during the springtime, especially down in Florida and the southern states, most of the time those fish are less active during during the morning hours, during the low light hours, or maybe the cloudy days than they are during the midday hours. So once that sun gets up and starts warming that water, they're going to get more active and they're going to be easier to catch. But the flip side is true for post-spawn, summer and fall. Those fish are more active generally in the morning and the afternoon. And I think that there's a lot of parallels between bass fishing and pike and walleye from what I've experienced. So Kevin, you fish a lot of lakes with willow grass. What baits do you like to fish with? I'm not sure. Do you mean willow bushes, or is there a certain type of grass? I'm not sure exactly, but I will say if it is an emergent grass, a grass that's above the water that that's kind of sparse, the grass kickers from Z-Man Texas rig with a little pegged 3/16 ounce weight is excellent for just making long casts over the grass and just reeling it in. Heavy braided line, 50 pound, 65 pound, real heavy rod, and just covering water with that bait. You're gonna have a lot of fun with that if that's what it is. If it's the type of willow bushes that you're essentially just got some branches that are coming into the water creating a lot of shade, I like to either flip with some type of maybe a flipping tube or like a flapping craw, or even just throw a stick bait like a Senko or a Zinkers around those weightless around those trees. Those are my two favorite techniques. Or maybe even a swim jig, skip it underneath there. My email, Mario, is sonar@sonarfishing.com. What are my favorite search baits? Scott, good question. My favorite search baits are chatterbait, swim jig, spinner bait, and if I'm in a grassy situation, I'm going to be throwing the grass kickers that I just mentioned. One of the best search baits out there. Another one is a speed worm. That's another great one for making long casts and covering water quickly. It's one of my favorite search baits of all time. And then if I'm fishing flats, just large expanses of flats, maybe there's a little bit of grass out there, a lipless crankbait is really good. But those baits right there can pretty much up shallow, the style of fishing I like. Those are good search baits. Mario, for a wacky rig, do you let it fall and drag it, or do you hop it back to the boat? The way that I fish a wacky rig is similar to my Ned rig technique. I essentially am using it as a spot casting technique. Okay, so I'm fishing areas that have isolated pieces of cover, whether it's a stalk of grass here or maybe a lay down over here, and I'm casting around this cover, not in it because you don't want to get snagged, casting it as close to it as possible and letting it fall vertically on its own. So it's going to shimmy on the way down, and just let it fall all the way to the bottom. Don't impart any action to it. Have a slack line. Watch that line for any hits. You're just going to see a little tick. Once it hits the bottom, you wait a second and then lift it up, let it fall back down again. And then from there, I generally will reel it in and make another cast to another piece of cover. It's that easy. That's generally what I do. So Adam, top baits for fishing from the bank. So I wrote a good blog about this for Sweetwater. As any type of fishing, it really depends, but I would say my favorites are a chatterbait, a swim jig, and I'll use a wacky rig Senko or stick bait or Zinkers, maybe Texas rigged actually instead of wacky rig. If it's really, really sparse, then you can throw the wacky rig, but I like to use a Texas rig, weightless, Zinkers, and cast around cover so you're not getting snagged, because you can't go to it when you snag it from the bank. So those three baits: chatterbait, swim jig, Texas rig, stick bait. Those are my Man, you guys, there's a lot of people still on here. I really appreciate you guys being here and being part of this. Um, Before you guys go, again, if you guys are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or on YouTube, subscribe to me on YouTube, and then visit me and you know, like my page on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So thank you guys for being here, sincerely. And those guys that won those gift cards, send me an email, give me your address. And that again is Daniel Carney, Scott, Charlemy, sorry, I butchered that one, and then Mario. Any more questions? All right, guys, I think that's probably it. It looks like nobody has any more questions. If you do, you can visit me on those different social media sites, or you can send me an email at the email that I've been discussing, and I can answer all those. We got another one from Mario, just real quick. Jerkbait cadence in 68-degree water. I don't know. It really depends, man. Sometimes what I like to do is I like to pick some of my favorite songs and then, you know, move that jerkbait to the the beat of that song. You know, I'm a big Pink Floyd fan, so figure out a Pink Floyd song. They start hitting it on, you know, I don't know, The Wall, then I would stick with The Wall. Maybe Wish You Were Here after that. But anyways, no, for real, just experiment with the different cadences. Try going really fast with a very few pauses. And then once that stops working or doesn't work at all, slow down a little bit. Start going to longer pauses and less erratic actions, okay? But it's all about experimenting and then recognizing when they hit, in my opinion. All right, guys, thank you very much. Again, this was presented by Navionics. So go give them some love and watch some of their other webinars that they've got. Hope you guys like it. And I will see you guys out there on the water. Take care.